Good evening, Tristar athletes. Coach Cliff. We are live here, the mentorship team, to answer your questions and go over your training for the past week. So pretty excited to be here this evening, talk with you guys about how things are going, answer questions that have been going on in your training. And we're in the middle of the season here, and lots of races happening and going on. And so with the mentorship team, you guys are able to go ahead and text in, ask me questions as we progress through your training, and any question is totally fair game here to go over training data, nutrition, you name it, as it relates to racing. So my topic for this evening for you guys to be thinking about is my favorite. We've talked about it a little bit before in the past, but it's whether you're doing your first half Ironman or you're doing your personal best half Ironman. We're going to be chatting up some topics about how you can prepare and how you can think about really executing your best half Ironman. So with the mentorship team, I want you to go ahead and give me some thumbs up, give me a like, let me know that I'm doing a good job up here, and if you have a question, please do send it through so that I'm able to answer it for you guys. So without further ado, go ahead and start asking me some questions as we go along here. I have the Staffordshire 70.3 in the background for you guys to watch this evening. This was a great race. We had several Tristar athletes who raced it and had a good time there. And conditions were actually quite good this year. And thought it would be a good topic of conversation and bring us all together towards talking about 70.3s. So any questions to get us started? I will leave it up to you guys. Otherwise, I will get going and start talking a little bit about half Ironmans and 70.3 in general. All right. So with half Ironmans, the focus is on raw stamina and just generally going longer. So if this is your first ever attempt at a 70.3, or maybe you have some limited experience at a 70.3, then really going longer, just the being on your feet for multiple hours at a time is really what it's all about. So because of the bike heaviness of the event, and similarly with the Ironman, the long bike really tends to be very critical, as does your long run. The focus for our kind of early athletes in the 70.3 kind of progression is really to focus on heart rate as a limiter and making sure that we don't bump up above zone 2, because we really need to teach the body this economy on the longer distance rides and runs to teach the body to also burn fat as a fuel source. So heart rate becomes really, really key. So as I mentioned, it's cycling centric, muscular endurance specific. So things like extended hill repeats, long 40-minute efforts, 20-minute efforts, where you're really allowing the muscles to get and absorb a good dose of strength is where it's at. If it's your first, that's going to be a limiter. So we really need to be very highly focused on cycling dynamics and cycling specifics. Hills are a great way to do this. 2 to 5% kind of grade types of hills, intervals that can be quite extensive, quite long, 20 to 40 minutes long. Course selection. So if it's your first 70.3, you want to be considering, should I be going flat? Should I be going hilly? Well, a flat course is going to be a little more advantageous, but then you need to start thinking about whether or not, you want to select a hot event or you want to select a cooler event, as well as, a hillier one might benefit you if you are on the lighter side. And so course dynamics becomes very important for your first 70.3. Next is running volume. You have to be really, really careful when you're doing your first 70.3 in watching, as you start to tip up with those 2-hour runs, especially in the final 8 weeks to a big 70.3 progression, making sure that you don't have injuries, that you're holding best form, that your cadence is very high. And that really will set the stage to make sure that you can critically get through your first 70.3. I find that it's very typical for people who are doing their first half Ironman to actually touch critical volume towards Ironman, actually, in terms of biking, because of the fact that we know that more aerobic work can get done on the bike. Running by its nature is quite demanding, and so we have to put a little more emphasis there. So you may notice, if you're part of the Tristar team more newly to the 70.3 distance, that some of the plans are more geared and focused towards developing that muscular strength and more so on the bike rather than on the run. In terms of the frequency, you'll see also there's quite a bit more cycling involved. All right, so we'll continue on to the first half Ironman, best practices. But first, I want to kick it back to you guys. See if there are any questions out there. I know we got 4 of you guys on the call. Reach out, let me know what's going on. I'll tell you what, I was up at our Lake Placid camp this weekend and saw some huge efforts being put out there. First day we had was super sunny and beautiful. And then Lake Placid, as predicted, would deliver us some rain on Sunday, and quite a bit of it. And so we got to practice the best of both worlds. I had everybody do Whiteface as a bike ride. This is a very challenging ride. It's one of the hardest, I think, in all of North America. And boy, it just was a great weekend of training. And if you guys are starting to plan out for next season, 2019, we will be back there again and doing a training camp at Lake Placid on the race weekend of Lake Placid for our training camp. So whether you're racing, we'll be there to watch you, or if you are looking to prepare potentially for Ironman Mont Tremblant, we'll be there gearing up and using the fitness for that. Or if you're doing any late season Ironman or 70.3, Lake Placid is always a good choice to be there. So I encourage you, if you're looking to break through and bust through some of the plateaus that you've been experiencing in training, that's where it's at. These short, intensive types of weekends where you can push yourself against other people, but also on terrain that's challenging in a very short time frame, really expand your potential. So I'm going to show you how it's done. All you guys are super quiet tonight over there. I'm not sure where everybody is, but that's okay. So I'm going to type in a question and say, what about nutrition? What about it? So guys, go ahead and ask your questions. I know there are 4 of you on the line this evening. Perfectly acceptable to ask any questions you want. Or you can watch, I know there's a lot of you guys who also watched, our live replay during the week. So that's perfectly fine too. Just want to make sure that when there is a question that comes up, this is your opportunity to kind of jump in and ask some questions. Thank you for the like. Appreciate that very, very much. So, all right. I'll jump back into my topic here, which was you had your first half Ironman preparation. Now we're talking about nutrition optimization, hydration, as well as fat burning and carb burning. So with hydration, it depends on what time of year you're preparing, but I noticed that a lot of new athletes have a really, really difficult time figuring out how to take in good amounts of hydration. And the only way that you really motivate yourself to take more is not just by saying I'm going to take more and forcing it in. You actually have to have something more than that to motivate you to take in water. So the way you take in water more substantially is through electrolytes such as thermolytes or endurolytes or salt stick, which is my preferred brand. And salt stick, because it's a very concentrated pill that has chromium and magnesium, it's a mouthful of marbles to say, that will force the thirst mechanism, get the hydration into the muscles, and really allow you to have a great race. Without water fully, coursing through your body and in your muscles, you're going to slow down like the Tin Man. Your heart's going to get thick and viscous and not be able to pump. So I know a lot of you guys have, followed me on this, and our Tristar athletes are very good becoming salty beasts, as some of our athletes would say. But no, it bears mentioning that is a really key formula to getting faster, is making sure that you can take in fluids vis-a-vis your salt intake. Okay, so now we're talking about fat burning versus carb burning. These are those slower, long efforts that I was talking about, and training in the proper zone. So heart rate zone 2 and zone 3 is the only place that we can maximally take in fat burning and teach the body that economy. If you start getting up into heart rate zone 4, zone 5, then we really start to struggle, and we're burning a lot more carbs, and we never really teach the body that economy. That wouldn't be a problem if you're doing an Olympic or you're doing a sprint, but when you start doing something much longer, your body needs dual resources because you're going to run out of calories. So not a problem if you're highly optimized. You don't need to worry about this as much, heart rate that is. But when your first Ironman or your first long distance event, you need to have the ability to burn fat as a fuel source and that happens only at low heart rates zone 2 and zone 3. So really important. Even the advanced athletes are going to prepare and train in this zone. So good one for you guys to note. Let's see, Mr. Kevin Williams is sending me through a message. I'm going to dive over this here. Let's see. Oh, I'm getting some questions that may not be coming through from you guys. Hopefully, let's see. Durst has got a question. Durst says, hi, just 2 questions for tonight. I'm not sure if I'm not getting through to you guys on the website here, so I'm just going to mention back here. Durst says, hi Cliff, just 2 questions tonight, then I got a blitz. How far over intensity factor wise is going too far on a workout? I think I did my long ride too hard the other day and it's affected my week. How much does the heat affect heart rate? Just earlier today, blew up on a run and set a new heart rate threshold. All right, so the answer is any IF over what I'm suggesting is potentially to push you into a overtrained kind of a state, or it just is a harder effort that you have to factor in the recovery Durst. So all training is good training. The question is it specific to what you need to get done for your training and for your prep? Okay, so I guess to answer your question is you can go off the reservation, do your own thing, so to speak, but when you do, you may need an extra day on the back end as recovery. So maybe that's 24 hours, sometimes it's 48 hours. I think I've messaged you guys about these types of things, but I'll also drop in a note here so you can have that to reference as well. Okay, Mike says, hey coach, 3 weeks out, when do we review the A priority race in detail? So I will be posting your notes for the race in Training Peaks as part of the mentorship team. You can ask questions you want here live, or if you are at the event, and you are for Lake Placid, we will be reviewing the course there in detail. So your race plan is going to be specifically posted in Training Peaks. That's part of it, and you'll see it on race day and with the notes on exactly how to execute the entire race. What's going on, Saxton? Glad to have you here. I'm not sure why I can't see all you guys on my message side. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to, and I really appreciate Kevin pumping me some notes here so I can see what's happening. Thanks, Kevin. Keep pushing those to me if you would. I'm not able to see anything that's going on Facebook Live except that there's a few of you here working in the room. Okay, so Kevin says, is run decoupling expected a couple days after a race? Kevin says he had a 5% decoupling on his run yesterday. So if you can isolate that temperature wasn't a factor, you can isolate that other things weren't a factor. A 5% decoupling rate, first of all, is not a terrible amount, but post-race, right, you're in this accelerated state, and you're going to find that your body has to work even harder to produce an effort. So it wouldn't be surprising at all in the first 7 to 10 days that you would see a greater amount of decoupling. So great question, Kevin, and one that doesn't happen necessarily often. Sometimes people have a hard time getting their heart rate up and don't find that decoupling is an issue at all. But I do note for those who can recover fairly quickly, their muscles recover, but their engine, the heart, hasn't. That's because it's a very deep type of fatigue that you guys go through when you race. So really, really good question there, Kevin, and just means to back off just a touch and make sure that you're okay. Durst, I'm going to circle back to your question here just a little bit. You said, how much does heat affect heart rate? Above 80 degrees, it affects you a lot. It also depends upon how large you are. If your core temperature is cruising up there and getting extremely hot, then you're going to find that it's decoupling happens at a pretty dramatic rate. So really, really good questions coming along, guys. Thank you for the awesome tips here, Kevin, too, on decoupling and getting into your own training here. So Durst, just one more question I think you had here. Yeah, I think just watch yourself that you're not also doing much more above the training that I'm suggesting or in the plan, for instance, session to session. If you've gone over one and then you've gone over another, right, you really are starting to stretch it because there's only so much maximum you can take week in and week out. There's only so many times the heart rate, for instance, can beat per week. But I have no problem with you guys going off the reservation, doing your own thing from time to time. I encourage it. I like it. Just watch that you take the day off or even 2 days off afterwards, okay? So really, really cool. Great questions, guys. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to jump back over to, let's see if I can get back to our presentation here. Rockin'. All right. So any other questions, Kevin? Just keep bumping me for them. I want to make sure that I'm getting everybody's questions answered this evening. Back to your first half Ironman. FTP work. Is it necessary to do FTP work for your first half Ironman? Not necessarily. The longer sessions, this is really cool. You don't have to do things like sweet spot workouts or above and just below threshold to raise your threshold. You can actually raise your threshold if you just do sustained efforts over distance, especially true if you're new to the sport. How cool is that? You don't even have to do threshold work. So realize that your entire peak curve of anything, whether it's heart rate, and we were to graph it out and show all your peak heart rates in time, or if we were to graph all of your power, peak power in time, or peak pace, for instance, any piece of that curve influences other parts of the curve. So if your, let's call it 90-minute best is only, let's call it 100 watts, but your, 10-minute power is something like 300 watts, you have a huge gap. So if you start to raise that 90-minute by another 10 watts, well, then you start to influence both sides of the chart. So pretty cool stuff, things for you to work on and think about, especially in your first 70.3. Your first, that is, you guys, a lot of you guys have already done one. It's, I think, good to also understand, as you mature as an athlete, to have a lot of these concepts and know that you may even still need some of these, even if it's not your first half, but maybe it's your second or third, okay? Next one is muscular endurance. We talked a little bit about this. This is the key to 70.3. Huge in terms of needing to develop strength in the legs in order to resist fatigue so that when you get to the run, you can really have a time trial, an awesome time trial that's in the form of a 13.1 marathon. And then half Ironman looks more like an Olympic, so race 1 or 2 Olympics. Yeah. So it's great practice for the transition sake of it, for the swim practice of it, all extremely critical stuff. And, it does look a lot more like an Olympic than it does an ultra distance event, like an Ironman, for instance. So the more you're practiced at it and the more seasoned you are at doing those types of races, the better. So lastly, practice specificity. Whatever you guys do and you want to do on race day, do it and do it often, and do it even more often the last 6 weeks that you guys get close to your A priority race. Extremely critical. All right, so Kevin's going to text me in some questions since for whatever reason I'm not getting these on here, guys. So thank you, Kevin, for that. Let's see here. So Mike Hawk says he has 5236 cog up front. And he thinks 25 is the largest cog in the back, and he's noticed that it's pretty impossible to stay under the max threshold when doing sustained climbs above 6%. Yeah, I think that you may want to introduce a 28 rear cassette to the operation there, Mike. I think given that you're going to be doing Lake Placid, and I will tell you after I just previewed this badass course that it probably will benefit you at least 2 to 3 times on the course where you're going to say, hey, it'd be much better for me to just spin up this thing. So I think a 25 is aggressive. It's good if you don't have climbs above about 8 to 10% typically. And 23 in the rear is not nearly enough gears, and you're going to find that you grind your legs down pretty substantially. So yeah, I would definitely look into getting a different gear selection, Mike. And thank you, Kevin, for posting that through. Yuki, what's happening, my friend? Thanks for joining the call this evening. You're a little quiet over there. That's cool. Always Yuki absorbing over there. One of the better and astute students, just like all you guys, absorbing. So what other questions you guys have this evening for me? as we keep moving through the call, I can start moving on to what the elites start to do for 70.3 racing if there's no other questions. And thanks again, Kevin. Keep pumping me with what questions people are posting here, because I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing them at this juncture. Let's see if I can maybe move over to Facebook Live on my phone. Maybe that's a good way to do it. And maybe that will have you guys there. So let's see, mentorship. Turn my volume down so you guys aren't hearing me in the background. And there we are. All right, now I've got questions going on. Shannon, what's going on? That's nice of you to be on the call, and certainly good for you to absorb all this as well and your questions. Just feel free to chime in anytime. Mike says, I think that a sweet lamp in the back is blocking the Facebook messages from going through. Boo. Well, I can actually see them. There's a whole separate screen that I have to actually see them, so it's cool. I can now see it at least on my phone for you guys. So I don't think the sweet lamp in the background is bothering you guys. But I am still on the road on the East Coast, but we'll be cruising back to the West Coast to the Southwest Geography, Tristar Southwest this week. Okay, let's see. I'm going to scroll back here just for a second. Okay, I got Mike's questions. Awesome. And we went through run decoupling. Okay. Yep, we're all good. I think we're all caught up, guys, at this point. All right. So moving on to some of the next topics, if you like. Again, just chime in. I can see your questions now. No big deal. All right. Okay. So how about PRing a 70.3, guys? What about doing your personal best? If you're trying to achieve your personal best, raising your CTL is really an important thing to be thinking about, which is also known as your fitness. Having a requisite amount of CTL is really important. So that's absolute fitness. That's a rolling 40-day average of your training stress points. We call it CTL, or continuous training load. Reverse periodize. For those who are trying to really peak and hit their best ever 70.3, we need to get the FTP up early on and reverse periodize. We don't do a whole lot of volume in the beginning. We actually do quite a bit more functional threshold power and speed based optimization. Raising your thresholds higher by using 5Ks, 10Ks, and 40K time trials. Really important. If you want to have a fast 70.3, you need to raise your functional threshold, pace, power, and the way you do that is by challenging yourself with 5Ks, because right, you're going to be pushing yourself against others. It's not something that I as a coach can give to you guys. You have to be there with other athletes who can push you to do just that. Next up is a time like a half marathon, about 3 to 6 weeks out from a race. And that 3 to 4 weeks is ideal because you get a chance to go hard, battle test yourself, and you're nice and fit, and you go just above race pace, and you can still recover from it and have a great 70.3. So your longest training days, if you're looking to place and do really well, need to total up to about 80% of the total distance and need to be fairly hard for a lot of people who are trying to do their best. Really, a lot of sub-threshold work has to get done to be able to achieve a very high output in a 70.3. You need some longer training days, and they need to be pretty close in TSS to about what you're going to see at the total amount on a 70.3. So you need to get up to some 300 days pretty regularly in that final build block up to your peak 70.3. Race a sprint, race an Olympic 8 weeks out, which is also another really important and critical thing to do because you just need to be battle tested, and you take some of that fitness into your training and you roll it. So you train on a bit of fatigue and you actually race on a bit of fatigue too, which is also the hallmark of some of the top 70.3 athletes in this world and country. All right, so before I keep going further, I'm going to see if I can bounce out of here, go back to Facebook and check in on your questions. Looks like I got nada questions. Looks like you guys are absorbing and just sitting in and listening, which is just fine. Totally fine, guys. All right, so I'll check back. And so double bike days, some of you are very familiar with double bike days. Here's how you grow those super strong legs. Get a little bit of recovery in between, a little bit of food in between, rest, and then go grind out another good, solid, hard ride in the evening. This is how you really develop strength and muscular strength, learning to cope and deal with fatigue so that you can produce on race day and maybe not even use all that firepower that you have on the bike, but then get off and run really, really well. All right, so next is double bike weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and skip the long run. This is only like once or twice in a training cycle that we do this, but it is another, if it impresses you anything on you guys this evening, is that we really have to see a high output on the bike, all right, a really high output, and that we have to be strategic and pointed on the run, but we don't have to have the same volume that we see a lot of typical runners have. You need to run your long runs less than or equal to 2 hours easy. And your mid-long runs need to be very hard, much more closer to threshold pace. So like 6 to 8 miles at a really good clip. And the long runs don't need to be hard or cannibalize the entire program. Again, this is a little different, somewhat different for our intermediate and beginner folks that need to do a good amount of work in kind of that gray zone to just have the raw stamina to be able to put out a good effort at like a heart rate zone 3, you know, for instance, a pace zone 2, but that perceived effort that's like more like a 6, a higher output. That's the beginner folks. Again, the advanced folks don't need to quite do that nearly as much. So training partners is another important part. Master swims, group rides, things that challenge you, step up your game. That's where it's at for 70.3. We can't just do it solo. We have to have some peer pressure pulling us through to get what we want in training and in racing. So lastly is season setup. The race, you know, a 70.3 early and build up to the second one. So I really like it when people have a very good progression from, let's call it January even to June, and then they have a short interlude and a break, and then they start to ramp back up towards their peak event, which may be September, October, November, even up to December in their racing. And that's really solid because they're, again, taking that fitness, compressing it, and then developing those FTPs, not losing them quite as much and carrying them into a later part of the season. So I will pause there for a second. I'm going to go back over to your questions. Let's see what we got going on. And still no questions from anyone? Anyone out there? Bueller? Okay. Well, I want to thank all you guys for coming this evening. If there's not any questions coming through, but it's one of these things where challenging yourself to get better, to get faster, means trying different things. And so I want you to switch up not only the stimulus of your environment, but your training energy systems, your training partners, and get creative with what you're doing so that you can have a really great race, a great 70.3, Olympic sprint, and certainly a full as well. But let's see, one last check. See if Kevin's got me, sending me some questions here. Okay, I think that's it, guys. So mentorship team, thanks for joining me this evening. Another great call with you guys. Keep up the great work. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you at some of the races coming up. We have some planning to get started for 2019. You guys know the races that are out there. We've been posting them on Facebook. Start thinking about them, start registering for them so you don't get blocked out and shut out before the race season begins early next year and you're fishing around trying to find one of the events that we're all going to be at. So thanks for being part of the team. Looking forward to seeing you guys again next week. Please get on to our Facebook messaging board and just post us a message on what kind of topics you want to hear. Every week, you know, I'm coming up with different things that I want to tell you guys, but I want to make sure that it's something that really impacts your training so that you can use it going into your next race. So have a wonderful evening. Train hard, train smart. I'll be back on the Tristar Athletes Southwest group next week and be traveling around a bunch this summer, going to different races, but always here live with you guys and excited to be a part of this wonderful team. I'll see you guys soon.